Welcome to Antarctic Stories, a podcast that takes you behind the scenes into the rich world of people who live, work, and undertake daring expeditions in the polar regions. My name is Heather Thorkelson, and I'll be your host today. Johanna Davidsson is a Swedish adventurer who describes herself as a strong and cheerful ski bum. Her day job is working as a nurse in Tromsø, Norway, but her true passion is being out in the snowy wilds, a calling which has led her to break several impressive records, including landing in the Guinness Book of World Records. It all began when Johanna moved to the French Alps at age 20 for a short time, but she fell so in love with skiing that she ended up staying there for 4 years. When she returned to Scandinavia, she headed to Norway in order to pursue her passion for skiing and the outdoors. In 2014, Johanna Davidsson and her older sister Caroline Davidsson kite skied over Greenland, from Narsak in the south to Qaanaaq in the north in just 36 days, covering a total distance of 2,317 kilometers. They became the first Swedes who had crossed Greenland lengthwise and were jointly awarded the Women's Adventurer of the Year award in 2014. In December 2016, Johanna reached the South Pole as the first Swedish solo woman, the fastest Swedish person, and as the fastest woman in the world. On this expedition, she skied to the South Pole without assistance or support in 38 days, 23 hours, and 5 minutes. After a short rest, Johanna then returned to her starting point at the Hercules Inlet on the coast by kite skiing, making her the first Swedish adventurer to go to the South Pole and back again. With a total of 56 days, her return trip became the fastest one ever made. Johanna received the Swedish Award for Women's Adventurer of the Year in 2016 and the Norwegian prize, the Shackleton Award, in 2017 for her South Pole expedition. As a female adventurer, she strives to inspire other women and girls to go out and explore. While doing so, she doesn't want her or her fellow sisters to be defined as girl adventurers. They are simply adventurers, and Johanna has proven that anything is possible, as she has gone further than most women and men. Her strength lies in her desire to be outdoors and to inspire others to chase their dreams, no matter what the obstacles. Johanna Davidsson, welcome to the Antarctic Stories podcast.
Thank you.
It's so exciting to have you on the podcast. I actually met you briefly at a wilderness expo in Stockholm about a year ago. And I remember then when I met you that I came up to you and said, I'd really like for you to be on my podcast. So it feels like everything's coming full circle now.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you so much.
So you fell in love with skiing and cold places at a really young age, but this Antarctic trip is totally next level, obviously. At what point did you decide that Antarctica was the dream, and why?
It's a little bit hard to say exactly the answer when. I can remember I read a book about Amundsen and Scott when I was probably a teenager, but I don't think it was a dream to ski there then. It was like tempting to go there, but it wasn't like I had that dream. And then after spending time skiing in the Alps and then more skiing in the Swedish and Norwegian mountains, I guess my interest of like longer trips grew. And when I worked in Hardangervidda in Finse, I got to meet some people who had been to Antarctica. And then I think then that's when I really decided, because I had thought about doing a long ski trip and I had Antarctica in the back of my head. So I think that was like a little bit of a turning point when I was in Finse, that I was starting to visualize the dream more. And then, so it kind of grew. It's not like a special moment or something, and then after went to Greenland with my sister, that's when I really decided to go for it.
Wow. So Greenland wasn't a preparation trip. It was just a separate entity. You wanted to do that with your sister, and then Antarctica sort of became real after you tested yourselves. Is that correct?
I've had thought about Antarctica before, but it felt like such a big project, and it felt like so huge. And after Greenland, I was like, I really want to do something like this again, because I thought it was great to be on a big plateau like Greenland. And took a little while after I came back home, but then I was like, I want to do this again, and I want to experience being up on the big plateau. And I knew that Antarctica is the big dream, so I will. Then I decided after Greenland.
I had read that you funded this expedition through a combination of crowdfunding, sponsorship, and bank loans. And I'm not sure that the average listener understands just how much work it is. I mean, all the logistical work, of course, in the preparation, but also to drum up the money to complete an expedition like this. Can you share a little bit about that process and the time that goes into it?
It's a long process, and I think I'm probably more proud of me holding out or like keep on doing that than the skiing part, because trying to get sponsor, that was tough.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time in front of the computer and trying to contact different companies or trying to different ideas how I would get this money, and spending a lot of time just getting hold of people or writing emails. Yeah, and most was like no answer was no, and it's kind of hard to keep on going when you don't get any, like when I didn't have any money. Yeah, it was getting very close to when I was going to leave, and I still had maybe, I don't know, 2,000 euros, and I was going to have 100,000 euros. It's like,
oh my gosh,
it was quite a far away from the.
That's got to be really tough on your self-esteem to be like getting all these no's. And is there, when you were pitching these different organizations, is there a way that you were trying to differentiate yourself? Because there are, you know, a number of people who try to make bids for the South Pole. So is there something that you were trying to, an element that you were trying to sell yourself on in any way?
I tried to pitch myself as the first Swedish woman who's going to ski solo. Because there has been both Swedish women and men skiing there. I wasn't pitching myself as going for the record, because it wasn't my plan, but I guess I could have afterwards. I just wanted to go there, experience Antarctica, and for me it felt like a big enough goal to just ski to the pole, and so I didn't want to like promise anything that I wasn't gonna think I was gonna make or finish.
For sure, because it's pressure enough to just complete the mission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So your journey took you from the Hercules Inlet to the South Pole, and you started out with a sled that weighed about 110 kilos. And I read that you weighed every bit of gear and every bit of food that you had with you to keep it as minimal as necessary. But that still must have been at least twice your body weight. Not to mention, you are 160 centimeters tall. So for the North Americans, that translates into about 5'2". I gotta know, what is it like pulling so much weight behind you every day, and what effect does that have on your body?
I think in the beginning it was quite hard, the snow, and then it was quite uphill, the start of from Hercules Inlet. So I was worried about that first bit. What if I can't pull everything, and I guess I just have to go twice or whatever. But the snow was pretty hard, so that was making it easier. But of course, it's not easy. You're walking pretty slowly, but you're getting into it, and you kind of just have to keep on going for a long time. And it's not any point to like go fast and getting really tired. I think just like being very efficient and take small breaks, make sure you ski your hours, and you kind of get used to the sled. I guess it's part of you. And some days are harder, some days it feels easier, and depending on the snow. If it was windy and drifting snow, it was much harder. If it was soft, it was much harder. But as long as it was pretty hard and not too bad, sastrugi, it was okay. And yeah, you just have to do it.
Just carry on.
Yeah, you just need all your things.
I love it. Small but mighty. I really I love the fact that there's some women that I know of that have gone to the South Pole that you would expect that they would make it because they're strong and tall. And so for you to have gone down, you're like, no, I'm 5'2". I'm going to take this giant sled and I'm going to make it. I find that so inspiring because it's proof that anyone can do it if they put their mind to it, And one of the things that I really appreciated about your journey that you shared on Instagram and on your blog is how cheerful you seemed the whole time. Because often people, when they're tweeting or sending messages or reporting back about how it was to go to the South Pole, they talk about like the tough bits and the hard days. And it was, and like sometimes the weight just never stopped. And that's kind of what you expect the journey to be like. And yet seeing it through your eyes was like a cheerful one. And it's not that it wasn't hard or that you didn't have to take some rests and all that, but you were so upbeat, or at least that's how it seemed. You were so upbeat the whole time. Did you feel that way, or were there times when you were like, this really stinks?
Of course, it wasn't like super happy all the time, but I think I was just so happy that I finally got to do this, that I've been working for it really hard for a long time, and I put a lot of effort, a lot of money, a lot of time and everything. So that was just the holiday to be there. And this was what I wanted. I wanted to ski to the South Pole. So I was sometimes when I was like a little bit not cheerful, I was like, come on, Johanna, you're not allowed to complain. You're living your dream. I'm lucky to be able to do this. So I think without really planning it, it was one of my like techniques to manage, because if I would have started to think, oh, it's so windy and it hurts here and hurts there and it's so heavy, and that would be just, I wouldn't enjoy the trip then. It would just be hard. So I kind of tried to just stay positive, and if something went wrong, don't swear, just like, oopsie daisy, I have to fix this or whatever. So because I was nervous that what if I start to like think really negative and there's no one else who can cheer me up, so I just need to cheer myself up. And I think it's probably a good thing to try and stay positive.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was quite hard, because then I wasn't going to go for any like records, but when I noticed it was possible to get there for Christmas and also for this record, I started to push myself a bit, and then it was a little bit of a mind game of being like positive and a little bit hard in my head.
Because that's got to be one of the times in your life where you've pushed yourself physically and mentally the most, I would imagine.
Yeah, it was on the borderline.
So I love this mindset. I mean, it's so key, right? And you shared in the TED Talk that you've given about the mental tricks that you use to make things more manageable for yourself. And this started as some mental tricks that you and your sister used in your Greenland expedition. Can you share a couple of examples of how you change your way of thinking about things in order to make things seem easier or more manageable?
In Greenland, me and my sister, we had this pact. We called it Easy Pact or whatever, because when we started by sea level, we had to pull sledges that they were even heavier. They weighed 120 kilos each. Wow. So we had to pull them up for at least 1,000 meters before we could start to kite. And it was really heavy. But we decided not to use that word heavy, because then everything would be so heavy, and sledges are heavy. And so we just say that they're easy. And if it feels really heavy, we can say they are relatively easy. And great. I think that helped us. And we just like stayed more positive, and it was more of a joke. For
sure. Lightens the mood.
Yeah. Well, it worked for us.
So what are the essentials that you have to survive on a trip like this? Obviously, there's certain items that if you lost them or if they broke, it could be really, really bad news for you. What would those items be?
Well, you need to get food. So you need to have a stove that works. You need to have fuel. So if you would have a big leak, that wouldn't be good. Or if the stove would stop working. And you need to have shelter. So you need a tent, or at least some kind of shelter. So yeah, if you have shelter, you have your food. Of course, other things are really important, like you have your big gloves and you have your goggles. And I guess you can improvise, but yeah, I wouldn't like to lose my skis. Then I had actually like double skis on my sled. I could take my spare pair. But I think that as long as you get food, shelter and you have clothes.
You're good.
Yeah, I did lose my big down jacket on my trip.
I was going to ask if there's something you lost or broke along the way.
Yeah, that wasn't so good, because I had it on top of my sled and I hadn't attached it very well, and I had seen it, so I was I'm going to attach that in a good way next time I stop, and I forgot about it. And then finally I lost it, and then I had to ski after it for a few kilometers before I found it. So there was a few extra kilometers.
Well, at least you were able to get it back.
Yeah, exactly. It could have been worse if it was really windy
I also read somewhere that you wear contact lenses. So was that an issue for you in Antarctica with the lens solution freezing and that kind of thing, or did you have a different solution?
I thought it was going to be a problem. So I thought I normally use monthly contacts. So I thought that it would be good to bring daily contacts. And I just heat them up in my clothes or whatever. But I realized that those daily contacts weren't so good for my eyes. So I used my monthly contacts, and I could just warm up the liquid, and then I can keep it, if I just keep it in my sleeping bag, whatever, because everything gets frozen, solid frozen, of course, when it's in the sled. But as long as you just take them into the tent, heat them up, you can just use it as you do home. So it wasn't actually a big problem.
It's always, whenever I think about these types of expeditions, it's always those little tiny things, the little, tiny little logistical elements that you wouldn't normally think about. But when it gets down to the day-to-day and like how you take care of yourself, how you make sure that you can see.
Yeah, because it's important.
Pretty critical, even if everything's white.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sometimes I couldn't see anything, but...
So I understand that you took 2 satellite phones with you and some other gadgets to be able to keep in touch in case you needed help, and also just to communicate with folks back home. Mm-hmm. But how is it that you pass the time when you're skiing such large distances every day? Do you listen to music or podcasts? And if so, how do you recharge electronic devices in such a cold environment?
Yeah, I didn't always have anything in my ears, like listen to music and stuff, but I did bring music, and I brought some like radio programs and some audio books. And it could be good to, like in the end of the day when I start to feel tired, to listen to some music or something that make the motivation go up a bit. Yeah. And then I could charge it with a solar panel, and I could charge it in the night. I didn't have to have the charging it during the day. So I could put the solar panel outside the tent and then just pull the cable through, and then I could just charge them in the nighttime. And as long as it was sunny, it wasn't a problem. When it was many days with clouds, it could be a little bit more harder to charge it, but it still worked.
That's great.
I didn't bring so much music. If I do it again, I'll bring more than one playing list.
Yeah, I guess that could get a little boring after a month.
Yeah, it wasn't so much good music to listen to.
So, you've talked about going up in elevation, obviously, because the South Pole is quite high elevation. Can you tell us a little bit about how the conditions changed as you got higher up and closer to the South Pole, and what effect that had on your physical ability to make good distance every day?
It goes up more, like you start at sea level, about maybe just 100 meters above on the frozen sea ice. And then the South Pole is at 2,800 meters. And the last 2 degrees, it kind of flattens out because it's just a huge plateau closer to the South Pole. So in my mind, I was thinking it's going to be harder up until the second last degree, and then it will be like flat. But it's not really like that, because it's so long distance, and the uphill doesn't really show. In the beginning, you can see it's uphill, but then it kind of rolls a bit. It goes uphill, but then it kind of, because the ice is a bit more alive, or how you can call it, because it's a continent and there's mountain underneath, and depending how it looks underneath. So in my mind, I thought it was going to be much easier the last 2 degrees, but then you're at higher altitude, and I thought that 2,800 meters is not so high, and didn't take it so serious. But then I realized it was much harder towards the South Pole, because it was harder to breathe, and it gets much colder up there. It's more minus 25, minus 30
Oh my gosh.
every day, and maybe a little bit wind as well. My body started to get tired. For the last 2 degrees, what I thought that my sled will be much lighter and I will be used to pulling the sled, I could probably go faster. But instead, it was the opposite. It was like harder to keep the distance, and that's also hard psychology, that you don't make as long distance as you did before.
Yeah.
When you have expected that you could do even longer. So that was a little bit harder, but so there was definitely harder the last 2 degrees, which is also a little bit softer snow, which doesn't glide.
Right.
It's more like a sandpaper snow up there.
Oh, that doesn't sound easy.
No.
So nevertheless, based on your original calculations, you thought it would take 50 days, but it actually only took you 38 and change. So was that because you were actually more capable physically than you had thought, or because the conditions of the whole trip were more favorable than expected, or was it a combination of both?
I think probably a combination of both. I think definitely I could have had a tougher season with more snow. Now it felt it was pretty hard snow all the way until the last 2 degrees, because I hadn't done like a long trip skiing with a sled like that before. I've done long kiting trips, so it was hard to calculate exactly how many kilometers I'll be doing per day. So I just looked at what have other people done and took some kind of average and thought that's okay, maybe I'll be 50 days.
Yeah. So you rested at the South Pole for, what was it, 5 days after reaching? And then turned around and kited back.
Yeah, exactly.
What were you thinking when you started that leg going back? Were you, I mean, because 5 days, sure, that's rest, but you're still probably pretty exhausted from so long on the ice. Were you excited to kite back? Was it daunting? Like, what was the mindset that you were in at that point?
It was hard to leave the South Pole, because when I got there, I was super happy, and it was great to be there and hang out with other people, other expeditioners who came in, and the camp manager and everyone who were there. So I had a really good time, and it was a heated tent and food and all the like securities there. And then I was going to leave and go out on the plateau again, which was quite cold, and the last memory was it was tough. Yeah. So I really had to pull myself together and leave the South Pole, and it wasn't easy at all, because I guess I could have just gone back home and like, I skied to the pole and it was managed and everything. But I had to give myself like a little kick in the bum to leave it. And as soon as I'd done that and I got like a few kilometers out and I was on my way, then it felt really good. It was really nice to be out again, because it went faster than I thought, and my first plan was that I wanted to experience my trip as long as possible and really enjoy for as many days as I just can. Suddenly I was being all this efficient and very fast, and so then it was really nice to have this extra days kiting out when I wasn't so pressured after the watch, because I could kite when it was good conditions, and then I could take a sleep in and just hang out in the tent if it wasn't so good wind. So I could really more just like relax and just so it felt like perfect. I got both like a trip where I pushed myself and that was fun, but I also got the trip out where I could just more chill and have luxury time in the tent. And
for sure. And enjoying the silence and the nothingness of a place where most people never have the privilege of going. It must be really wonderful. And not to mention the fact that by then you were fully aware that you had broken the world record. So must have been like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it went better than I had expected.
That's amazing. Who was at Hercules Inlet to meet you when you finished that leg?
When I got to Hercules Inlet, there was no one. So it was just me as it's been all the other nights. And then the day after, they came with a plane from the base camp. And it was a small Twin Otter plane, but it was full of people. And when they opened the door, they had brought music and King Crown and champagne and... So it was really, a cool welcome party.
That's awesome. That's really, really neat. So, what's something about doing an expedition like that alone that our listeners might not expect or know about? So, something that only people like you who have skied alone across Antarctica would know about.
I guess you don't think about it, but all the, at least for me, if you're out there for many days alone, you don't get any impressions. You don't get, like normally in your life here, you see screens, you get so much information all the time. You speak in the phone, you see TV, and you get so much. But there you don't have anything. So whenever you get a phone call or a text or something, it's so big. Or if I listened to an audiobook and there was something, it wouldn't necessarily even be sad. It was just like so more emotional than what it is in the normal world. Or so that's one thing that is special about being alone for such a long time, I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that, but it makes sense because there's just a lot of nothingness.
Yeah, I don't know. You clear your mind in some way. You get to think through everything, and then after a trip, well, at least for me, a trip like that, you get very like it's easy to focus, and you're not so. It's not any chaos in your brain. It's more just like clear.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you brought some of that clarity or that ability to clear your mind that you gained there back home with you?
Yeah, maybe a little bit, but it's hard to stay in that way for a long time. And when you go back and it's busy life and you start to like rush back and forth. And I guess it's nice with both. Sometimes to have that kind of like just silent and nice, but then it's nice also to have a little bit of a bit more speedy life or whatever. But I think it's good to have both, so you don't get just a speedy life. You need some rest sometimes as well.
For sure, absolutely. Have you been back to Antarctica since?
Yes, twice actually. I went back the year after, and then this year again. So I've been back working as a field guide.
Oh wow!
Okay. For a company called ALE. So. I fell in love with the Antarctica and I really wanted to go back. And when they was like, oh, you should come back here and you could work, I was like, oh, maybe I should do that.
Perfect. That's great. So it opened up doors for you to continue to go back and do the things that you love in this white environment.
Yeah, it definitely did. It was a good investment.
That's excellent. Is there any project or cause that's close to your heart, Johanna, that you would like to give a shout out to for our listeners?
Yes, I have. I released a book last year, and it's about my trip to the South Pole, but also my whole way to get to the pole. So it contains some more adventures and inspiring interviews with other polar expeditioners or skiers or adventure people. Yeah, so that's something I would like to shout out.
And where can people get that? Where can they get a hold of your book?
They could get it through my website, Solo Sister, SE. Or if you're in Sweden, you can order it on Adlibris, I think, in the web shop. Yeah. So if you want to know more, it's available.
Excellent.
Yes.
Okay. So what is the best way for people to follow along with you then? Obviously on Instagram, you're very active on Instagram. People can follow you there. We'll put the link for that in our show notes. Is there anywhere else that people can follow along your adventures?
It's mainly Instagram at the moment. I have a website as well. If you want to see more about what I have done and read a bit more about the South Pole trip, the Solo Sister website. But I think I'm more active on the Instagram and Facebook.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We will post all of the links to follow your future adventures in the show notes, as I mentioned. And just thank you very much. And hopefully we'll see you on the podcast again sometime.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of Antarctic Stories. If you like the stories we bring to you, please subscribe for future episodes. And if you want to help the podcast, leaving a rating or review greatly assists us in reaching a wider audience. Antarctic Stories is a production of Twin Tracks Expeditions, your experts in small ship expedition cruises to the Arctic and Antarctica.
We love sharing our insider knowledge to help you find the perfect ship for your next polar expedition. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, or at twintracksexpeditions.com.